In 1994, a small British workshop called Norton won the Superbike Championship with a bike that weighed 268 pounds and made 135 horsepower. The next year, that bike was banned from racing. The official reason was production numbers. Norton was bankrupt and couldn't build enough road bikes to meet the new rules. Simple, fair, end of story. Except it wasn't that simple. For 7 years, Brian Crichton's rotary-powered Norton had been beating factory Hondas and Yamahas. The bike was legal the whole time. The rules kept changing to keep it racing. Then Norton won the championship and suddenly those same rules kicked them out. Was it really about production numbers? Or was it about a self-taught engineer in a caretaker's shed embarrassing the biggest manufacturers in motorcycling? This is what actually happened. In 1984, Norton was dying. The company that once dominated the Isle of Man TT was building motorcycles for one customer: police departments. The Norton Commander was a 588cc rotary-powered touring bike designed for patrol duty. It made 79 horsepower, weighed close to 500 pounds with all the police equipment, and was slow. British police liked it because it was reliable and different from the Japanese bikes flooding the market. That was the only thing keeping Norton alive. Brian Crighton joined Norton that year as a service technician. His job was maintaining the Commander bikes when police departments brought them in for service. He was 37 years old and already knew motorcycles inside out. In the 1970s, he had won the British 50cc championship 3 times on modified Honda road bikes because he couldn't afford proper race machines. He learned to make things faster by doing it himself. But here's what nobody expected. When Crichton looked at the Norton rotary engine, he saw potential nobody else saw. The Wankel rotary design was compact and light. It only had 3 major moving parts compared to dozens in a traditional 4-stroke engine. No pistons, no connecting rods, no camshafts, no valves, just a triangular rotor spinning inside a housing. The engine made power 3 times per revolution instead of once every 2 revolutions like a 4-stroke. That meant smooth, constant power delivery. The problem was nobody at Norton cared about racing. The company was focused on staying in business. Crichton kept suggesting they could build a race bike with the rotary engine. Management told him he was wasting his time. The rotary was for police work, not racing. Crichton wouldn't let it go. So, in 1986, Crichton did something that would change everything. He grabbed an engine from a crashed police commander sitting in the workshop. He started working on it after hours in a shed behind the Norton factory. The shed belonged to the caretaker. Norton management told the caretaker to move out and let Crichton use it as a race shop. They still didn't believe in the project, but they gave him space to prove himself wrong. Crichton's challenge was different from building a traditional race engine. You can't just install bigger pistons or wider camshafts in a rotary. The engine doesn't have those parts. Modifying a rotary is more like tuning a 2-stroke. You change the ports that control air and exhaust flow. You adjust carburation. You work with exhaust design. Crichton started with a cooling system. Police commanders overheated in slow traffic because they had too much cooling area designed for low speeds. At racing speeds, the bikes would be moving much faster and needed less cooling area. Crichton reduced the cooling fins so the engine wouldn't overcool at 150 miles per hour. Next came the exhaust system, and this is where things got interesting. He designed something he called the exhaust ejector. The rotary engine ran extremely hot. Crichton used that heat to create a vacuum effect in the exhaust. Hot exhaust gases rushing out would pull cooling air through the engine internals. At the same time, the vacuum helped draw fresh air into the carburetors. The system was similar to a 2-stroke expansion chamber theory, but adapted for the rotary's unique characteristics. The effect almost doubled the engine's output. The stock Commander made 79 horsepower. Crichton's modifications pushed it to around 120 horsepower. That was 40 more horsepower with basic porting work and exhaust design. The engine also made power across a wide rev range instead of just at peak RPM. Smooth, strong torque from 6,000 RPM all the way to redline. For the chassis, Crichton went to Spondon Engineering. They built an aluminum twin spar beam frame that was light and stiff. The first prototype used Kayaba forks from a Suzuki RG500 and Dimag wheels. Total weight was 320 pounds. Power to weight ratio was better than anything else in British racing. And then came the moment of truth. In August 1987, Crichton took the bike to a club race at Darley-Moor with Norton employee Malcolm Heath riding. The bike finished 3rd in its first ever race. Norton management finally paid attention. They told Crichton to keep developing the bike. The caretaker's shed was now officially the Norton Race Shop. Now, if you're enjoying this story, hit the like button and subscribe, because we're just getting to the good part. Through 1988, Crichton kept refining the bike. Riders like Simon Buckmaster and Trevor Nation joined the team. In August 1988, substitute rider Andy McGladdery gave the Norton its first win at Carnaby. The bike was fast, but still raw. It handled poorly and riders complained it pushed wide in corners because the rotary engine had almost no engine braking when you closed the throttle. Then in October 1988, everything changed. Steve Spray showed up at the Powerbike International at Brands Hatch. He had never ridden the Norton before. Crighton asked if he wanted any changes to the setup. Spray said just put fuel in it. He went out and won both races. The crowd went wild. The Norton sounded like nothing else on the grid. A deep, angry roar that turned into a high wail at full throttle. Flames shot from the exhaust on deceleration. Watching from the grandstand was a marketing executive from John Player Special Cigarettes. JPS had sponsored Norton before, back in 1973 when Peter Williams won the Formula 750 TT. The executive saw the crowd reaction and the race wins. Within weeks, JPS signed a 3-year sponsorship deal. The Norton would race in 1988 in the iconic black, gold and silver JPS livery. What happened next was total domination. Steve Spray won the 750cc Super Cup Championship and British F1 title. He set lap records at Donington Park, Buxton, Snetterton, Brands Hatch and Cadwell Park. Trevor Nation won races and finished 4th overall. The Norton beat Terry Reimer on a Yamaha OW01 and Carl Fogarty on a Honda RC30. These were factory-supported rides with huge budgets. The Norton was built in a shed. Attendance at British races surged. Fans flocked to the British bike beating the Japanese factories. JPS sold thousands of black and gold paddock jackets and baseball caps. Steve Spray won MCN's Man of the Year award. The Norton Rotary became a cultural phenomenon. But not everyone was happy. From the beginning, there were complaints about how the Norton was classified. The engine measured 580cc. Norton claimed it should race in the 750cc class because it was a 4-stroke engine with 588cc of displacement. Simple math. But racing officials and competitors saw it differently. A rotary engine produces 3 power strokes per revolution. A traditional 4-stroke produces 1 power stroke every 2 revolutions. That meant the rotary was making power 3 times more often than a 4-stroke. Some officials wanted to classify the 580cc Norton as a 1176cc engine by doubling the displacement. That would ban it from 750cc and 1000cc racing entirely. The FIM originally rated the Norton at twice its displacement, then they relaxed the rule to 1.7 times displacement. A 588cc engine multiplied by 1.7 equals 999cc. That kept the Norton legal for 1000cc races by 1 single cubic centimeter. The rules seemed designed specifically to let Norton keep racing without giving them what competitors called an unfair advantage. Terry Reimer, riding for Honda, summed up the frustration. He told reporters he was tired of Nortons passing him and spitting flames in his face, but he admitted the crowd loved it. The Norton made British racing exciting again after years of Japanese factory domination. Success brought changes Norton wasn't ready for. In 1990, ex-Honda Britain boss Barry Simmons joined as team manager. Simmons and Crighton didn't get along. Simmons wanted to redesign the bike. Crighton believed the spondon frame and basic design were working fine. The two men clashed repeatedly. And then, in September 1990, Crighton quit Norton. Steve Spray left shortly after that. In 1991, Simmons brought in chassis designer Ron Williams, who built a new frame made by Harris Performance. The new bike was called the NRS 588. It looked differently and handled differently. Riders Trevor Nation and Robert Dunlop struggled with it. Results fell off. In 1992, the Kawasaki ZXR 750s of John Reynolds and Brian Morrison dominated British superbike racing. The Norton Rotary had lost its edge. But 1992 also delivered Norton's greatest moment. Steve Hislop needed a ride for the Isle of Man TT after his Yamaha deal collapsed. Norton team boss Barry Simmons leased him a white liveried NRS 588 with backing from ABUS Security. Hislop had 1 test session at Alton Park, 8 laps total. Then he went to the Isle of Man TT. The 1992 Senior TT became one of the greatest TT races ever run. Hislop battled Carl Fogarty for 6 laps around the 37.73-mile course. Neither rider was ever more than 7.5 seconds apart on corrected time over nearly 2 hours of racing. On the final lap, Fogarty broke the lap record with a 123.61 mile/hour lap trying to catch Hislop. Hislop stayed calm and brought the White Norton home 4.4 seconds ahead. It was Norton's first senior TT win since 1961, 31 years. JPS pulled sponsorship after the 1992 season. The official Norton factory team folded. The company was spiraling towards bankruptcy. Norton had proven the Rotary could win the biggest race in motorcycling, then disappeared from racing. This is where most people think the story ends, but Brian Crighton wasn't done. Drop a comment if you remember what happened next. Brian Crighton never stopped believing in the Rotary. After leaving Norton in 1990, he started building his own race bikes. He called them Rotons. The name combined Rotary and Norton. Crighton kept the Rotary engine but designed his own chassis, a twin shock setup instead of a monoshock. simpler and easier to adjust. Finding sponsorship took 18 months. In 1993, Crighton signed up Colin Seeley, a legendary tuner and team manager. Duckham's Oil became the title sponsor. The Duckham's Crighton Norton team entered the British Super Cup Championship. Rider Jim Moody finished second in both the Super Cup and British Superbike Championship in 1993. The bike was competitive again. For 1992, Seeley expanded to 2 riders, Ian Simpson and Phil Borley. Simpson was 24 years old and had never won a superbike race. He had won the Supersport 600 Championship in 1991 and the Supersport 400 Championship in 1993. But superbikes were different. Bigger, faster, harder to ride. Simpson also wasn't getting paid by Norton. Zero money. He was racing a second bike in the Supersport 600 class on a Yamaha just to make enough prize money to survive. Colin Seeley didn't want him racing 2 classes, but Simpson had already signed deals with Avon Tyres and Yamaha. He needed the income. The Norton was difficult to ride. Simpson said it felt like an on-off switch, full power or nothing. When you closed the throttle and leaned into the corner, the bike pushed wide because there was no engine braking. Even less engine braking than a 2-stroke. You had to lift the rear wheel off the ground going into corners so it would spin and not push the front end. Simpson crashed repeatedly learning the technique, but once he figured it out, the Norton was fast. Really fast. The bike weighed 268 pounds. This was lighter than any other superbike. The engine still made 135 horsepower with smooth torque everywhere in the rev range. Simpson could short shift and stay lower in the RPM without losing speed. The power was always there. The 1994 British Super Cup Championship was 11 rounds and 22 races. Simpson and Borley demolished the competition. Together they scored 14 wins and 52 podium finishes. Simpson won the championship. Borley finished 3rd. They regularly finished 1-2 in races across the UK. Non-championship meetings, they did the same thing. By 1994, the Norton wasn't necessarily faster than the competition anymore. Honda's RC45 and Ducati's 916 had caught up in outright speed, but the Norton was still lighter. The lighter weight made it faster out of corners. The broad torque curve meant riders could be smooth and consistent without chasing peak horsepower at 12,000 RPM. Simpson insisted the Norton didn't have an unfair advantage by 1994. When the JPS bikes first appeared in 1989, they were much faster than bikes like Yamaha's FZ750 and Suzuki's GSX R750. The handling was terrible back then, but the speed advantage was huge. By 1994, other bikes had closed the gap. The Norton just had a skilled team and a rider who learned how to ride it on the edge. Competitors didn't see it that way. They saw a hand-built special with a controversial engine design winning races against production-based factory bikes. Honda and Yamaha were spending millions developing their race programs. Norton was operating out of a small workshop with a tiny budget. The complaints grew louder. After the 1994 season, British racing officials announced a rule change for 1995. The championship would become fully production-based. To be eligible, a manufacturer had to build a minimum number of road-going motorcycles for public sale. The exact number varied by source, but Norton couldn't meet it. The company was bankrupt. They weren't building any road bikes. The official reason was homologation rules. Racing had to be based on bikes people could actually buy. That made sense for a production-based championship. Honda built thousands of RC45s. Ducati built hundreds of 916s. Norton built maybe 130 F1 road bikes total between 1990 and 1992. Production had stopped in 1994 when the company collapsed financially. But racers and fans saw it differently. The Norton had been legal from 1989 through 1994 under various rule sets. The bike competed in Formula 1, then Super Cup, then British Superbike Championship as the series evolved. Rules bent and shifted to accommodate the unusual engine design because officials wanted the Norton racing. It was good for attendance and good for British racing prestige. In 1994, Ian Simpson won the championship on a Norton. Then suddenly the rules changed and the rotary was out. Competitors had spent years complaining about unfair advantages. Factory teams didn't like getting beaten by a small British workshop. Some observers believe the big manufacturers put pressure on racing officials to ban the rotary after Norton's dominant 1994 season. Colin Seeley didn't fight the rule change. He had no backing from Norton because the company no longer existed. For 1995, Seeley switched to running Honda RC45s. Ian Simpson moved to a factory Castrol Honda ride. The Duckham's Crighton Norton Rotary never raced again in British Superbike Championship. So was it safety, fairness or politics? Let us know what you think in the comments, and stick around because the Rotary story isn't quite over yet. Ian Simpson was blunt about the Norton years later. He said he never understood the flag-waving patriotism around riding a British bike. To him, bikes were just nuts and bolts. He would have ridden a Russian Ural if it was fast enough. What mattered was the people. Brian Crighton staying up all night getting the engine ready. Colin Seeley managing the team. Mechanic Dave Hickman working until dawn to have the bikes ready. Simpson wanted to win for them, not for British pride. Simpson also confirmed that Norton had serious disadvantages by 1994. The rotary engine wore out quickly, rebuilds were constant, the bike smoked heavily and wasn't environmentally friendly, reliability was marginal. In the wet, the Norton was extremely difficult to ride because the power delivery was so abrupt. Simpson said he was lucky there weren't many wet rounds in 1994 or he would have crashed a lot more. Terry Reimer, the Honda rider who complained about flames in his face, admitted the Norton made crowds happy. That was the problem for factory teams. Fans loved seeing the underdog British bike beating the Japanese giants. Attendance and TV coverage surged, but Honda and Yamaha weren't racing for entertainment. They were racing to sell motorcycles. Getting beaten by a boutique British rotary didn't help their marketing. The official story was simple. Norton couldn't meet homologation requirements. New production-based rules meant you needed to build a certain number of road bikes. Norton was bankrupt and couldn't build anything. End of story. But several factors came together in 1995 that ended the rotary era. First, Norton's financial collapse meant no factory support and no road bike production. That gave officials a legitimate reason to exclude the bike under new rules. Second, years of complaints from competitors about the displacement classification created pressure to resolve the controversy. Third, the rotary's dominance in 1994 with 52 podiums and the championship win made the timing convenient for a rule change. The Norton rotary had always existed in a grey area. Was it a 588cc four-stroke or a 1176cc equivalent? Rules bent both ways depending on who you asked. The FIM said 1.7 times displacement. British Racing said it could compete. Competitors said it was unfair. Nobody ever agreed. In 1995, production-based rules solved the problem without directly banning rotary engines. If Norton had been financially healthy in building F1 road bikes, the rotary might have continued racing. But Norton was a dead company. The rule change just made official what was already inevitable. Brian Crighton believed the rotary was penalized for being a good engine. He argued it wasn't fair to force Norton to build a 300cc rotary to compete against 600cc four-strokes. You can't do the impossible. The rotary was efficient because of its design, not because it was cheating. Punishing efficiency didn't really make sense. After 1994, the Norton rotary disappeared from mainstream racing. Brian Crighton kept developing rotary engines privately for years. He worked at the National Motorcycle Museum maintaining the 18 Norton rotary race bikes in their collection. All the JPS Nortons, the Duckham's Rotons, Steve Hislop's White Charger from the 1992 TT, they were museum pieces now, but Crighton wasn't finished. In 2009, Crighton partnered with Rotron Power, a company that built rotary engines for aerospace applications. They spent 12 years developing a new 700cc rotary engine for motorcycles. The result was the Crighton CR700W, a track-only motorcycle making 220 horsepower from 700cc and weighing 289 pounds. Power-to-weight ratio better than a MotoGP bike. Only 25 CR700W bikes were built. They sold for £85,000 each. Hand-built by Crighton himself. The rotary dream continued, just not in racing. The Norton rotary raced competitively for 7 years, 1988 to 1994. In that time, it won the 1989 British F1 Championship, the 1989 750cc Super Cup Championship, the 1992 Senior TT, and the 1994 British Superbike Championship. The bikes won races at the Northwest 200, set lap records at nearly every British race circuit, and brought crowds back to domestic racing. Brian Crighton built all of it starting from a crash police bike in a caretaker's shed. Self-taught, no formal engineering degree, just decades of experience making things go faster. He invented the exhaust ejector system that doubled the rotary's power. He proved the Wankel engine could win races against the best bikes and riders in the world. So was Norton banned for being dangerous? No. The rotary was reliable enough to win the TT and finish entire championships. Was it banned for being too loud? No, racing has never cared about noise. Was it banned for being unfair? Partially. The displacement controversy never got resolved, and competitors complained for years. The real answer is more complicated. Norton was banned because the company went bankrupt and couldn't meet new production requirements. The timing was convenient. The rotary had just won the championship and complaints were at their peak. A rule change solved multiple problems at once without directly targeting Norton. But the result was the same. The rotary disappeared from racing in 1995. British racing lost its underdog story. Fans lost the sound and the flames and the spectacle of watching a small workshop beat factory giants. The establishment got what it wanted. The Norton problem was solved. If you enjoyed this deep dive into motorcycle racing history, make sure you're subscribed because we've got more videos like this coming. What other banned bikes should we cover next? Drop your suggestions in the comments, and thanks for watching.